The 6th of August ought to be, and once upon a time was, rather more than it is today, remembered with a certain sombre air. It was the day in 1945 that little fat boy, the first atomic bomb, but not the last, was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, wiping out in an instant hundreds of thousands of people, dooming hundreds of thousands more to die in agony of radiation sickness, and dooming mothers in the labour wards in the city for generations to come to give birth to deformed, horribly deformed children as a result of one single atomic bomb. The United States, which was indeed the perpetrator of this atrocity, went on to drop another one on the city of Nagasaki. I myself, on a speaking tour, addressed crowds in both cities, and it's possible to imagine that the shadows on the wall, the smears of human flesh that were all that was left of human beings, men, women, and children, but almost every single one of them a civilian. The shadow of those nuclear bombs, that mushroom-shaped cloud, seemed, to me at least, still to hang over both of these cities. Now, don't get me wrong, Japanese fascism was a fantastic, fanatic atrocity in itself. Japanese militarism, fueled by that Japanese fascism, in alliance with Mussolini and Hitler, caused atrocities right across the Asian region. My own wife's family in Indonesia were occupied by the Japanese. The Malaysians were occupied by the Japanese. The Singaporeans, the Koreans most atrociously of all, the Vietnamese, the people of Thailand, the people of the Philippines, and the atrocities committed, especially by a special unit of the Japanese armed forces that performed experiments on human beings, live human beings, that would have made Mengele himself balk at the atrocity that was committed. So when I say that the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, and especially the one that was dropped the second time on Nagasaki, was a crime, I mean it with all of the foregoing in mind. The bombs were not necessary. Japan was on the point of unconditional surrender. The arguments that I was brought up to believe that the United States had no alternative but to drop those atomic bombs, or they would have had to fight beach by beach, street by street, house by house, in order to get to Hirohito's palace and force a harikiri upon the emperor, were all lies. They were all false. The Japanese surrender had all but been signed. It had been inked and awaited only a signature. The real reason why the United States dropped these two atomic bombs was not to bring Japan to its knees. It was already on its knees. The bombs were dropped to keep the then Soviet Union on its knees, to tell the then Soviet Union that the United States had a wonder weapon, a weapon to end all weapons, a mother of all bombs that would make the others quail in the world, and that unlimited United States hegemony under Truman in 1945 would be the new world order. Gone was the convivial and fraternal spirit of the great meetings of the great war leaders, Mr. Churchill, Stalin, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. Gone was the intention of the victorious powers together to shape that new world order. The intention was to divide the world and, if possible, to roll back any gains made ideologically, militarily, politically by the Red Army's stunning victories towards the end of World War II. Of course, it didn't work out that way. Unknown to Mr. Truman, unknown to Churchill, unknown to the oligarchies running the Western countries, the Soviet Union had many friends, including in Los Alamos. They had many friends in the nuclear bomb business. And before very long, Stalin was able to announce that the USSR too had a nuclear weapon. And now the successor country, Russia, has more than 5,000, not just nuclear bombs, but hypersonic nuclear weapons. Weapons that can be there in an instant. Weapons that do not need a propeller aircraft to drop them out of a hole in the bottom of the aircraft. Weapons that have no defense against them, like the Oroshenk, which simply is indefensible. No weapons system on the planet can stop it. The Russian successor state to the USSR has weapons that can turn all of the United Kingdom to ash, literally to ash, and in an instant, within 12 minutes from leaving their launch pad. Weapons that are independently targeted. Weapons that contain within them 5, 6, 7, 8 independent warheads that separate from the mothership over the target area, taking out every major conurbation in the United Kingdom, and ditto in other countries. So it didn't work out well. The Japanese paid a very high price, not just for fascism, but for the ultimate defeat of fascism. I'm laboring that point because we're now in a world situation where actually nobody ever names the country that dropped the atomic bomb. When you see a commemoration of Hiroshima Day now, it does indeed talk about the mass casualty event on this day in 1945, but it virtually never names the United States of America as the criminal state that dropped not one, but two. And that might be ringing a bell in your mind, because we have now grown used for almost 2 years of mass atrocities, of mass casualty events that appear to have no author. We're told that starving Palestinians are gunned down in a bread queue, but we're not told why they're starving, who starved them, and who gunned them down, as if some cipher somewhere had brought famine to the land, as if some alien force had landed and was machine gunning and tank shelling the people standing in the Hunger Games lines. I say Hunger Games because Israel has now murdered 220 footballers, many of them the finest footballers in the Arab world. And today they murdered the captain of the Palestine national football team. As of this moment, not a single footballer still playing the game, none of the top footballers who went to Qatar in their rainbow-colored armbands, who performed virtue signaling provocations in Qatar about the host country's reactionary attitude towards lesbian and gay rights. Not a single one of them has said a single word about the atrocities committed against fellow footballers who are dead, murdered, and in many, many cases, deliberately them targeted, deliberately murdered because of who they were and what they meant to Palestinian civil society, to the Arab world's civil society. Not one, no Ronaldo, no Messi, no Mohammed Salah, no Muslim player playing in the top leagues of any of the divisions has said one single word about a fellow footballer, in their case a fellow Arab, a fellow Muslim, none of them have the guts to even issue a statement of condolence, if not of condemnation. It makes me rage with anger, as you can now tell. But of course, 220 footballers is as nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children who have been murdered, many of them in that Hunger Games that the Americans and the Israelis are playing in the Gaza Strip. Anyway, we have now reached the tipping point. But it may not tip the way that Netanyahu and his criminal gang anticipated. Netanyahu has declared that the Gaza Strip is going to be completely reoccupied. Now that's a big job. I myself was a frequent visitor to the Gaza Strip when it was wholly occupied by Israel. You may have heard me talk or read me say some of the horrors that I witnessed in those days, like coming around a corner with Mr. Abu Shawish, an Anthony Quinn lookalike of the United Nations, in a United Nations vehicle, and finding grown women and elderly women on their knees, cleaning the street with toothbrushes under the guns of the Israeli occupation forces. When I told Parliament upon my return what I had seen, even the strongest supporters of Israel were struck dumb. There was checkpoints. Every 100 yards or so, there were watchtowers everywhere. In the Jabalia camp, then a huge refugee camp, made such an impact upon me, I, on return, renamed my house Jabalia. But the resistance to the presence of these occupation forces was a 24/7 phenomenon. The Israeli occupiers never knew when someone was going to climb over that wire, when someone was going to open fire, when someone was going to plant and explode an IED. The attrition on the Israeli occupation, even back then when the resistance was much less battle-hardened than it has subsequently become, was very formidable indeed. Such that Sharon, no less, withdrew the Israeli occupation from Gaza, confining themselves to regular and devastating forages into Gaza, followed by withdrawal. So if Israel is going to fully occupy Gaza, it better know two things. First of all, that however many of the Palestinian resistance they have killed, resistors, entirely legal in their resistance to a foreign occupation of their land, every last one of them, entirely legal under international law, their sovereign right to resist foreign occupation. Don't expect it to be less difficult to occupy Gaza now than it was before. On the contrary, now that you have turned the Gaza Strip into Hiroshima, there's quite a lot of hiding places for the fighters to ambush you from within. But the second thing Israel needs to know, and don't take my word for it, take the word of the head of the Israeli army, who is threatening to resign over Netanyahu's decision. He says reoccupying the Gaza Strip is an impossibility. We don't have enough soldiers. They're committing suicide. They're going AWOL. They're refusing to turn up. The reservists are getting on a plane and flying to Florida instead. We don't have enough soldiers to do what you are ordering us to do. And moreover, those that we can put into a reoccupation of Gaza will suffer extreme levels of casualty and trauma. And the hostages that you told the world this was all about will surely perish in the carnage that will be unleashed. The Israelis have a solution, though. They've just asked the United States to send American troops to Gaza to help them reoccupy Hiroshima. History doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely often rhymes. So if you're a mother or a father in the United States, get ready for this. Your president might be about to send your son, your daughter, into the desert that is now Gaza. Only time left to comment on the extraordinary, best ever meeting that Trump just hailed between Witkoff and Putin. The meeting lasted 3 hours. That's a good sign. United States and Russian emissaries and leaders should be meeting each other all the time, constantly. The world is such a dangerous place. We are on the precipice of another nuclear conflagration in Europe, in West Asia, and of course, don't forget about it, over China and Taiwan. I welcome the meeting between Mr. Witkoff and President Putin. I welcome, if true, Trump's extraordinarily hyperbolic description of its level of success. But you'll forgive me if I wait to see and hear the details of what was discussed and what was decided. Our two guests this evening, the legendary Judge Andrew Napolitano and the legendary Larry Johnson, formerly of, well, how shall I put it, Larry? The bowels of the American security state, will surely help us understand these and other issues in front of us tonight. You've come to the right place. It's the mother of all talk shows.